Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm Rana, and Lynne and Owen Charles are returning to Thinking Green. They're back on the East Coast. I think they were last on in like spring of 2024, so a year and a half has passed. So we're more than due for an update. I know that when you were on last time, you were talking largely about your work on the border, and things have changed over the last year. So maybe now we'll dig back a little farther to when you started your whole new life about, 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think I proposed talking about the decision to move into a van. So for 4 years we've been living in our van. And when it started, I don't know what we thought we were getting into. I was walking by the TV and Owen was endlessly watching videos by Bob Wells. And I just kept walking by, and then one night I stopped and I realized he's serious about this. And shortly thereafter we had a conversation and he said, I want to live in a van. I want to get out. I want to do this full time. I want to sell everything, the house, everything in it. Are you up for it?
That's more radical than most empty nesters I know.
And it happened really quickly. What was prompting you, Owen?
Well, you had been after me to be a minimalist for years. You read the book, The Joy of Getting Rid of Things?
The life-changing magic of tidying up.
Yeah, and it finally hit me, and I went from a pack rat to a minimalist, like that. Well, over a couple of months to get rid of all the crap. I had boxes and boxes and boxes of things. It felt very liberating, and it was the right timing for us. Our kids had all grown up and left the house. Our last child was off to college, and my mom had passed away from COVID earlier the year before. So we really were unencumbered and able to do that. And my job, I was kind of early retired, but able to work remotely part-time. So all things came together and we were able to do that, and it just felt like the thing to do.
Now, what was the process like? I mean, it doesn't sound trivial because it must be more than just throwing away all your stuff.
Yeah, I remember this idea of, wow, we have a 21-foot van, and it becomes very clarifying that you can only put in the van what you can use. So my most beloved object, the dining room table, was that's not going. But then it was everything like that. It was like, okay, that can't go. No, you can't have that many pairs of pants or that many shirts, or what shoes do you really need? And for instance, with the dining room table, once I made that decision to let go of it, then everything else was easy. And it was even joyful, because it was a process of, you like it, you can use it, take it. I mean, there's sort of I don't know what it is, a serotonin rush as you start giving away things. I was really stunned. How about you, Owen?
For me, the hardest things were musical instruments, but in the end, all I really needed was my old acoustic guitar and one trumpet and I got rid of the electric guitar and the electric bass and other instruments and another trumpet, and I realized you know, even 2 trumpets would be hard to take care of because you have to oil them, and so and all the other stuff. Yeah, I like being now really minimalist and not having stuff, and like George Carlin says, places to put your stuff, and then you have to move your stuff. It's encumbering. It's liberating to get rid of it.
Right, and what we ended up doing on a practical level was sending out an email to everyone we knew. I don't know, I would say 60 or 70 people showed up at the house one Saturday, you know, just kind of streaming through, and we had, you know, take what you want.
It was like an everything must go party. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, especially things like books and records and some of Lynne's artwork, a lot of Lynne's artwork that otherwise were just going to be boxed up and put into storage.
And so now when we're back in Connecticut, we see our things. You know, we're served something, you know, a dish, and like, wow, yeah, I remember that plate, or I see my artwork on the wall. I was like, wow, I'm so glad you're enjoying it, because it would have been in a, you know, I don't know where, a storage unit until we died or something. Yeah, what's the point?
It's a little bit disturbing that in this society, storage units are a big deal.
Everywhere, they're everywhere, like fungus growing throughout the country. It's incredible. But you know, we went through it with, I guess, with our parents at the end of their lives, all the stuff that they had, and going through all that. And we also didn't want to burden our kids with that, or burden ourselves with that. So it was good to kind of go through it early, you know.
So once you hit the road in your van, maybe talk briefly about what you did for the first few years, because it seems as though your activities along this trip have kind of changed their focus many times over the course of the last 4 years.
I wanted to bring up the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous, and for people who've seen the movie Nomadland, Bob Wells is featured in that movie, and it's with Frances
McDormand?
Yeah, and you know, describes the nomad life, but it's a gathering, and what I realize now after the fact was it's really a training ground for mutual aid. And I think that a lot of people might think that, oh, you're becoming a nomad to escape or to leave community or to be a completely free individual, you know, but the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous is set up so that you are getting sort of a boot camp of learning how to help each other in community. For instance, I mean, the majority of it is a series of lectures, and those are all volunteer, and it's all about, you know, how do you live in a van? And you're rethinking everything. How do I wash my dishes? You know, for instance, we just had a spray bottle. We have a spray bottle with vinegar and water. Or, you know, what about boundaries? And even that psychological boundaries, like your family saying, what the hell are you doing? Why are you living in a van, and blah, 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 blah. Or solar panels. So they're telling you, they're helping you with all of that. But there's also a huge area of free items. And so people are trading and exchanging. There are a series of bulletin boards with services, services offered, services needed. Mm-hmm. We had some
memorably, yeah, like van repair or other types of repair. Yeah, we needed help with our sink. Our pump had gone out in our sink, and we needed to fix that. And somebody, you know, responded, and they did free work on our sink. It was great.
There's women and men who bring their sewing machines. So, you know, it's drop off what you want repaired. And then they also set up very loosely, caravans. And these are just sort of a flag in the desert. And you have to understand, Quartzsite is surrounded by 15,000 acres of BLM, Bureau of Land Management land. So you can camp for free on this land. Quartzsite has a population of 3,700 in the summer and something like
Oh
750,000
my gosh.
in January.
It's huge, yeah.
So, but one of the aspects is this caravan where we started a little caravan near one of the flags, and we thought, you know, who's signing in who? But it's just the people find themselves, and that we would meet around a fire every night and really have in-depth discussions about how did you come to this? What are you doing? What pushed you to this? You know, one woman said, I had a nervous breakdown. I had to leave my life as it was structured, and I knew I had to rethink it from top to bottom. Or other people talking about their jobs, or other people about, you know, financial, you know, bottoming out, which is becoming more and more prevalent.
Yeah.
That, you know, it is so.
The organization that is run by the group that runs the RTR, which is all just nomads themselves, a community group, but is the Home on Wheels Alliance. And they are geared towards specifically helping people who are indigent or at risk, kind of maybe working or not working, who have, you know, at risk of being homeless. And they have a vehicle, and HOWA will actually do periodic clinics where volunteers and donations will help people to convert their existing vehicle into a living space. And it's a really good organization.
Now, you know, I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission in town, and what strikes me about how people think about housing in cities right now, or within the state of Connecticut even, that neighborhoods should be economically homogeneous. You know, we've kind of reduced, at least, segregation by race and by ethnic group that we saw, you know, 70 years ago, so much. But now we see that everyone who lives on the same block basically has to have the same income because of the way zoning laws work. And so when you talk about the people who are involved in the van life, I'm guessing it's people from like every end of the spectrum.
Yeah, and that is true. That, I mean, there is a little self-selection. I remember we were in a group of people camping on BLM land, and they all had the Mercedes Travadas, which are
Travados, yeah.
they're super high end.
They're kind of luxury
you know, like
vans, and
200,000.
nice people. Yeah.
Very nice people, and we're in our little Mercedes cargo van that used to repair ice cream trucks. but no.
Yeah, so there's a right side of the tracks.
There's a little
here
bit
too.
Well, and they're running generators too, so because they have, you know, more things to run, and we're off grid really. So there is a little bit of subdivision between people who are more off grid, or some people who are in tents or in you know, passenger cars, and just converting that. And then there's people in Travados is kind of another subsection, and then you've got the people in the luxury buses with their pickup truck behind them, and like a you know, golf cart behind that, and a bicycle, and and they've just got, you know, it's like they've got more than you would have in your house on the road with them, and they're cool people too, and you know, but usually they're in a different neighborhood. So sometimes you're mixed together with all different. Depends on where you are. If you're in a smaller BLM place, then everybody's mixed together. But when you're in Quartzsite, it's so big that there will be kind of different sections. There'll be some of that, yeah.
Well, from the way you tell it, the winter population is like...
It's huge. I thought it was
Yeah.
1 million. You heard only 750?
That was a number I last saw.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It could be.
Yeah.
much
It's
bigger
huge,
than
it's huge.
any town in Connecticut.
Right, right. And what's crazy about it too is the town itself it's just nothing. I mean,
It's like
there are
3,700 people.
there's just a handful of whatever sticks and bricks houses. The main grocery store is actually in a tent, and it's seconds from the other grocery stores, you know, the surrounding area. And it's just incredible that this little town can take on
Yeah.
all these people.
Well, I mean, it was really vital for us to be there our first year, because it's really a good place. We highly recommend it for newbies, because you're going to learn from kind of your peers. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to meet people and have fun. And then, so we stayed there, I think, like 3 or 4 months, I think, the first year. And then the next year we only stayed like a month, and now we just go back just for the RTR, which is like 5 or 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still nice to meet up with the community of nomads, and we know folks who come there from California and folks from the East Coast, and it's a good place to meet up every January, mid-January.
And yeah, it's a better place to meet up than like New England, for example.
Well, and the most important thing is the access to the BLM land, because that's something I don't know about other people, but being in the East Coast and camping, we had never heard about Bureau of Land Management land in this. It seems
Free
like
camping.
it's free
great.
camping, and so for it to be there makes a lot of sense.
Some of the best camping, the best campsites we've ever been at are free BLM, Bureau of Land Management, or National Forest camping. And it's, really once you cross the Mississippi, it's all out there. And that's part of the history of this country, where the East Coast is so, densely populated and developed. It's hard to have the same kind of land use as out in the West. And we've been in the Grand Tetons and had just, is that what it was? Yeah, amazing overlook and an amazing community of people who were all just travelers and at a free campsite. Or even if you're at Yellowstone or something, there's BLM land on the outside of it. You can still go to a nice campground inside the park, but if you want to really be in the wilderness, you just find a BLM campground on the outskirts of even national parks.
And you do get used to also, what scared me so much at the beginning was to be completely alone in the landscape. And I remember the first time just being worried. And then you realize, like, this is probably the safest place that I could possibly be. We've had amazing experiences outside of Ajo, where we're parked way out in the land, and Owen will play his trumpet at night, and no one's around.
No noise ordinances.
No noise ordinances. And then at night, a couple times the coyotes came, and it felt like we were being circled by the coyotes, and they were serenading back to us, even the little pups.
Yeah, love the coyotes. Yeah, it's great.
Now, you spent quite a lot of time at the border, though. How has that changed? It seems like, over the last
Constantly.
year, everything's changed.
Yeah, and I will say that has been one important aspect of living in a van, is the mobility. That, you can find yourself in a place and respond to what's happening in that place. And we had come into Ajo, Arizona, in southern Arizona, in the winter of 2023, and just, we thought we were going to be leaving water in the desert, and they said, no, please help us at the border wall. And we had that program about helping people who were just crossed, hundreds a day in November and December of 2023.
Right. Well, 2022 we were there. 2021 we were there. We tried to hook up with the Ajo Samaritans. 2022 we were there we stayed for a longer period and did some water runs with the Ajo Samaritans, who are leaving water in the desert for remote travelers to help save lives. So many people have died in the desert. And then 2023 we came back thinking we would work with the Ajo Samaritans, but we were quickly recruited because of the lapse of Title 42. Is that correct? In
Right.
May of 2023, that led to people not being sent back right away, but being able to come into the country through the wall, which was very easily cut with diamond saws by the cartels. And there was an influx of 700 to 800 people a day on many days throughout November and December, especially of 2023. And we were there for that. We were recruited and we loved it. You know, I'm a registered nurse. I loved being able to do really kind of triage work and direct care with people who needed it, their first aid, and there was a lot of people who needed you know, patching up and blister care and you know, who had walked for many miles in the desert and who were exhausted. So it was an exhilarating time.
And
it was,
as well, we were able to get up to Tucson and get our wilderness first responder
Training.
certifications
Yep,
and
that's right.
training. And so there was a sense of, okay, you know, where are we needed, where next? And after we left, we were again considering, where are we needed? We went to Houston, the Houston Catholic Worker. They have a clinic that they run for migrants there. There was a thought that
and it's very medically focused and
Yeah.
providing medical clinics and care.
we might do that, but
Yeah.
after traveling a bit again, we
Part of
ended
it-
up in southern Arizona.
Yeah. Part of it was they didn't have air conditioning and it was like 110 degrees there. And yeah, our van doesn't have air conditioning, so we couldn't really
That's the
swing it.
truth of the matter.
Oh my gosh, your van really doesn't have air conditioning?
No, well, just in the front dashboard, but not for
Yeah.
nighttime. Yeah.
It's got 2 fans. But yeah, we didn't think Houston would work out for
Yeah.
months.
But really, that slowed down a great deal in 2023. Well, in 2024, in January, February, March of 2024, the U.S. Border Patrol ramped up a lot, and the Mexican federal police came in and stopped the cartels from pushing as many people across in that area, in the Lukeville border area. So things slowed down. We kept doing work with Humane Borders, but when we came back, then things had changed completely because President Biden had issued the executive order such that people would be immediately detained and deported. That was June of 2024.
Right. I think June of 2024, it was also the numbers that they were not allowing.
Right, it
The
was-
asylum was severely restricted based on,
A
it had to be,
quota.
the quota, and it had to
If
be,
it was over 1,500 a week or something like that.
which it
And
never.
it was way over that. You know, we had been seeing 700,
So
800
that
a day.
asylum was shut down. So again, we're asking ourselves, we're in southern Arizona, where are we needed? What can we do? And we heard about Salvavision, an organization that was working out of the repatriation office on the Mexican side of the border in Nogales. This Tucson is 2.5 hours away from Ajo, and so it was a lot of driving. And actually the BLM land around Tucson is not so great. So we were parking in a lot of church parking lots. But we were working in the repatriation office.
So this was just this past winter, yeah. And it was a little more depressing because, you know, the previous year people were coming across the wall and they finally made it after an arduous journey that may have been months for some people. Some people were coming across the Panamanian Darien Gap, which, you know, is a treacherous, at least 3 to 5 day journey through, you know, just treacherous land that many people pass away on. And they were making it and they were celebrating, you know, because, wow, we've made it, we have the right to apply for asylum. And so that was, in a way, joyous. It was, I mean, arguably a year of uncontrolled immigration. So you can argue one way or another. The fact is we don't have any sane immigration policy in this country. We keep swinging around like a political football. But during that time, it was joyous for those people. And during the time this winter when we were working with deportees, it was very sad because they not only had been kicked out of the country and stripped of many of their belongings, including phones and articles of clothing, but they also had been issued decrees such they were not allowed to come back. They were not allowed to attempt to get asylum. So it was people were very distraught.
Right. So outside of that Mexican office, we were meeting them in the corridor, and it was just an odd lesson in communication. You know, so many of these people, a lot of young women alone, just, you know, sobbing, and then they're trying to reach people on the phone, or mothers with children, and the children had, you know, really just their diapers and a t-shirt on, and they're all trying to figure out what are we doing next. Or I remember Christmas Day we were there. For some reason, this whole busload of 50 people had been deported, or, you know, sent out of the prison in Florence, Arizona, deported, and none of them had their phones. And, you know, they were telling me that the phones had been destroyed or taken. So it was a kind of, you know, like a double whammy, like they're even more vulnerable. So we were trying to, you know, going to little stores to get money wired, going to the little telephone store trying to get, you know, buy telephones. My telephone was being passed around, you know, in the corridor, and I never knew where it was. You know, it was like, where's my phone? And it was like, it's over here, and passing it around. But yeah, the vulnerability was what surprised me. And, you know, what we were hoping to do was to convince them to get to one of the shelters in Nogales, and to be confident about us and trust us, and to say, you know, this is a safe place. You know, if you were worried, I will go with you in the taxi. You will see that it's okay, and we will pay for your taxi. And surprisingly, there were grown men, you know, in their 30s, who were, you know, I was shocked the first time it happened when I said, do you want me to come with you? And they said yes. And we pulled up to the shelter, and they wouldn't get out of the car. And I said, you can come. You will get right into the gate, and it will close and lock behind you. You'll be safe here.
And they had been led to understand that we were safe people, because Lynne speaks Spanish somewhat, pretty well, and then there were also Mexican officials there who would help us translate if needed, and they understood that we were volunteers. What we were doing was for free. It wasn't going to be for money, because they had been taken advantage of their whole way through the trip by the cartels, and then they had been stripped of the remaining belongings by the Border Patrol and in detention. So they were scared. They were just used to being kind of you know, abused, and also afraid of the cartels as well. So we knew which taxis were safe to put people in.
Based on their license plates, yeah.
Helped to get them to the shelters, where they also had a good deal of security and support services.
Now, what kind of scale of numbers of people do these shelters serve?
They had enough capacity. There were, what, 3 or 4 shelters?
4 shelters, yeah.
And the one that is most prominent
Kino,
Kino, was maybe full.
Yeah, was it 200? About 200 at max?
Yeah, but what was amazing about them was they had, you know, not only the food and the showers and the clothing, but they offered legal services and legal advice and psychological.
And it was families only, but
right.
Who could stay there. But anyone, single man or single women, could be there to get all those other services during the day. They just had to go to another shelter in the evening, and they could stay there for, what was it, 10 days or 2 weeks?
Something like that.
It was a limited stay, and then they had to move on. They could try going to another shelter, but they're obviously needing to be repatriated to either sometimes where they came from, which is usually a dangerous area where there's cartel violence. We saw many people who had relatives killed or who were fleeing for their lives because their children had been threatened. They had to either join the cartel or they were going to be killed. So there was a lot of fear. So I think some people were also just trying to go to a different area of Mexico, or maybe try again to come into the U.S.
When you talk about the cartels, I think about, like, we should be looking upstream a little bit more and trying to figure out why so many people, you know, throughout the world need to leave where they are.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and there's several, economic, climate change, the violence itself, and what else am I forgetting?
And the wars.
Yes, the wars that the U.S. has started.
Destruction of their governments is such that they have dictatorships or, yeah.
It seems as though at a time when the U.S. is not embracing immigration, whereas in our past we did more of that. A lot of people are fleeing because of things that we had a hand in.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's the extremes, there's the people who want no immigration, there's the people who want open borders. I feel that the solution lies in between, where we can have a sane, well-managed policy, but it needs to stop being just a political football. And that's what it largely is in this country. It's exploited by both major parties, I think, for their political benefit. And you look to other countries. We had talked to somebody from the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, and Lynne asked, where does it well? Is there any countries that do it well?
And yeah, surprisingly, and we might have talked about this before, I thought he was going to say Switzerland, Norway, and he said Brazil. And Brazil it's very well run, that if you are allowed into the country, you are first taught Portuguese, then at the border.
It's no small task.
Right. And then you're given your working papers and your social security number, and then you're sent to cities and towns where the work is needed and is provided. And then as well, the hospitals and the schools have adequate staffing and to support the incoming migrant stream. So it's not, it is doable. It's very...
And I think some of them stay and many of them transit, but you could imagine with the amount of infrastructure work that is needed in this country, it could be taken off the table as a political football and put into practical practice such that migrants are allowed into the country. They do national service, they improve our country in needed areas and earn citizenship. And I know other countries have had guest worker programs like that before in Europe. Nobody wants out of control mobs in Chicago or New York, but that's part of the political football that we've done here. We don't know how to manage things.
Well, we barely manage getting the needs to people who are already here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So it seems like it's not a priority, but it's really clear that things have changed with the change in administration. It seems like things are more chaotic in general in the Trump administration than they were under Biden, but I wouldn't say either administration has been very friendly to refugees.
No, and I would say more under Trump, more punitive and more, scare tactics. Hysteria, just really frightening our communities, which, that's what Salva Vision, who had been in the deportation center in Mexico in Nogales, then shifted. We were there the day that CBP One, the One app, was denied. That was when Trump came into office, was one of his executive orders, and we saw every day there was a long line of people waiting for their interview in Nogales. And
that was legally entering the country through the CBP One app that was designed to have people fill out forms and come legally.
And they had waited for 11 months, 12 months, and
then they were just shut down. That was tragic.
And we were shown the phone with your appointment today has been canceled. This is, do not, almost, I don't think it said do not inquire further, but it's sort of like,
and now go disappear.
Yeah,
really.
Right,
Sounds like
right.
the message.
And then you saw the look on, especially, it was really sad to see the mothers and the fathers crying and their children consoling them, patting them, hugging them and saying, it'll be okay, or, it was just an incredible sight. And I couldn't believe it. You're just thinking, this is stranger than fiction, to turn on a dime like that. And these people's lives,
Wow.
Time and again, just whipped out the rug from under them.
And yet you'll hardly ever hear anyone here say, "Oh, people shouldn't come by legal routes." You hear,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah, we're all against people who come illegally," but my family came legally, even though the criteria have changed tremendously. All four of my grandparents came here in the early 1900s, and we do have Ellis Island records for one grandfather. I have no idea where the entry point of my grandparents was, but things were much more open in this country, and they could come in, and sometimes they knew people who had come from their village, who had settled in the U.S., who helped get them settled here. And now it just seems like it's all kind of fallen apart.
I know. I just an aside, we saw the movie Cabrini in the last year, I think it was a year ago or so, about Mother Cabrini and the Italian immigrant population in New York City. And it's hard to believe that anybody whose roots are with that, or
The
were
immigrant
Italian,
experience.
and seeing how mistreated they were, and how hard they were trying to work, and struggling to make it, can be unempathetic towards, a lot of people who are just trying to experience the American dream. Now, technically, asylum doesn't allow for that. It doesn't allow for economic pursuits. It only allows for people who have suffered or in danger of repression of some sort in their countries. But even that being a criteria, there's still many people, probably millions of people who would be eligible for that because of the gang violence, because of what was the situation in El Salvador, or it still is the situation in Guatemala, and in Africa, and in many other places.
I want to emphasize, though, this whole idea, what you started saying about how much things have shifted in terms of immigration and what's happening in the country year to year. But I think something important to emphasize for all of us right now is how important it is to be fluid and mobile. And that was a really important lesson from living in a van. I think for the whole first year, I was clutching the seat of the van, just what's next? Oh my gosh, and where do we stay tonight? What's going to happen? And where's the next this and where's the next that? And this lesson in just slowing down, calming yourself down, and saying, how does it feel? Where do I respond in a meaningful way to what I'm seeing in front of me? And the group Salvavision that we've been a part of, that was working in the deportation center, she seamlessly shifted the emphasis of their organization to working within Tucson with accompaniment to courthouses, with supporting the families that she knows that are undocumented, with food, with clothing, with backpacks, and with finding work, with finding housing. And so it's a totally different, sort of like a new terrain. And
so Salvavision continues, but just in a different venue, really, and doing great work. But Dora Rodriguez, who is the founder and director of Salvavision, she's a wonderful person. She's on a book tour, I think, right now. She's recently published her memoirs. She herself had barely survived a harrowing cross through the desert in 1980. So she tells her story in that book as well. She's
from El Salvador.
From El Salvador, yeah.
With a group of 23 people, and half of them died in the
Ooh.
desert.
Yeah.
And she recounts the story, and it has really focused her on how important it is to support all migrants in whatever way she can. And I can tell you that one of the exchanges in that repatriation office, it was a young woman. She was maybe 12 or 13, traveling with her father. They had crossed the desert and had walked for 4 nights when they were caught by the border agents and they were deported. And Dora was talking to them, and she was saying, "You cannot do this." And he was telling her, "I heard the conversation, but my daughter wants to live in America. We are going to try this again." And I saw the look on her face, just, as though she was going through another death. And she looked at him as seriously as she could, and she said, "This is very dangerous for your daughter." Afterwards, I asked her, and she keeps in contact with a lot of these people, but I don't know if she kept in contact with him, but I said, "Do you think they're going to cross again?" And she said, "Yes, I could tell he's going to cross again with his daughter." So just, to see that the depth of the emotional exchange and her commitment to this work is just amazing.
Wow. Now you're in Ajo, right?
Right. How did that happen?
Yeah, how did that happen?
I don't know. We went to the shelter and said we wanted a small to medium dog. We got a big dog. We're in the van. Maybe that prompted us to buy a little old miner's house in Ajo. This is where we started that work along the wall. And the shift is, how do we work in situ, in place, learning from what we've learned on the road, to be fluid and to respond to what's in the community and what's necessary. And what we're seeing in this little town of Ajo, population 3,000, is the social support system is just collapsing. The food bank was on the rocks, so we signed up to help with 4 other people to help coordinate.
It's a historic mining town where the mine closed over 40 years ago. So it is an up-and-coming post-mining town. There are some that are very, frou-frou and bohemian, like Bisbee or other mining towns. This is kind of hard scrabble, but it's also a great community of people. There's a lot of volunteers in Samaritan groups there, and so there is the support network of people. But recently, with the cuts, there's been cuts to I think the food bank in Tucson, as well as the Meals on Wheels and community dining for seniors, senior meals. So that's what we're trying to help out with now.
Yeah,
And we've gotten very involved in the food pantry locally to make sure that people who are in need, and it's usually 50 to 100 people a week who are coming in to get emergency food allocations.
And what do you see as the future? I know even here in New London, I see food insecurity being a growing problem.
I know. It is some. I must admit, I'm thinking long-term. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and that all of these, especially being in southern Arizona, we're at the sort of the end of the road, getting into Mexico. What happens if the supply chains are broken? What happens? How can we make ourselves more self-reliant? It's easier here in New England, where you can grow a lot of food,
Right.
in your gardens and community gardens, and I think that's so important.
Well, one of our friends who are with Samaritanos Sin Fronteras, Tom, wants to start a community garden in some open space. Now, yeah, you're going to have the issues of bringing in good soil and irrigating it or getting water, but there is that possibility once you have the land.
I'm thinking more of the growing would be happening in winter.
Yes,
than
exactly.
Yes, in
summer.
winter, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure. But it is possible, and he's growing in his own
Small greenhouse. Yeah.
a great deal of tomatoes and things. So it's possible, but that would be great to supplement and help, because otherwise you're dependent on just the food chain, and if the food, logistics chain goes down, then what do we have to eat? And the cacti, I guess.
And I think there's something too about, we all have to come to terms, and this was really important in the nomad life, was it just by virtue of being in your vehicle, in a car, whatever vehicle with everything you own, you are more vulnerable, and how important it is to help each other out, and that's never doubted. The bonds among people, and Bob Welst from the RTR talks a lot about that you value people, not things. You use the things, but your relationship with others is what matters. And somehow I think we have to return to that in all of our relationships, with building up neighborhoods and reaching out to one another and knowing, who needs what.
Yeah, wasn't it like love people and use things?
Right.
Not the other way around, use people and love things.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think mutual aid networks are kind of growing all over the place. One would think that a humane government would see that as their mission, because why do people need government if not to provide for the common good? But that seems to be a crumbling concept right now.
Right, definitely. Our two daughters are very involved in their own communities with mutual aid. And they've pretty much said, I don't know if you can look to the government anymore for help down the road, and we really have to move quickly to support each other.
Now we only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask you, for people who are watching, what can people in Connecticut and New London, southeastern Connecticut, do to support your efforts, or efforts of what's happening in other parts of the country, including the Southwest?
Go ahead, Owen.
Oh, well, I mean, the immediate thing is salvavision.org is a good place to donate to. And they are doing great work in Tucson and throughout Arizona. It's a very regional group, but I imagine there's many other such groups throughout the country. There's a lot of other great Samaritan groups in Arizona. There's the Ajo Samaritans who are doing great work in distributing water and food and first aid throughout the desert. There's the Samaritanos Sin Fronteras in Ajo. There is Humane Borders. There's the Tucson Samaritans and the Green Valley Samaritans. We've worked with all of these groups that are doing great work.
But I think that a lot of the issues, the terrain might be a little different, but it's the same community to community. The gardening projects, the community gardens, the accompanying migrants to their court dates, to find out which organizations are working with migrants and supporting them in your community.
Yeah.
To get, because a lot, it's under siege. The migrant community is under siege right now, all over the country.
Many people also do like vacations, work vacations, where they come out to Arizona or other places for a week or two, and they volunteer with these organizations. There's also No More Deaths as well. I left them off, which is more of a younger group, more radically focused in Tucson and in Phoenix.
Yeah, well, what you mentioned about it happening everywhere is very true. We've become aware in New London area and southeastern Connecticut that, being coastal, we are border.
Yes.
And I think we've never really thought about things that way. We think about the border, usually the Mexican border, but anywhere along the coast is border. And if you think along Canada, along the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf, it's like it's almost everywhere. And I know that there, have been ICE raids in New London, and immigrants and others who might get swept up with immigrants are very scared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there are organizations in Connecticut. We know of ULA that we used to help out with in New Haven that works in going to court dates and accompanying people and also helping people with workplace issues. And I'm sure there's many others. It seems like the focus has moved away from the borders more into the interior of the country.
And to every community.
Yeah. Which is not better for sure, but in a way it makes everyone more aware of what's been happening at the borders for so long.
Right, yeah.
Well, thank you, Owen and Lynne, for coming back and visiting Connecticut every so often.
Yeah.
And now that you have a place in Ajo, maybe people can stop by and
We would love to have
visit.
visitors, and we can help people with finding volunteer opportunities.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
was thinking they'd have to be work vacations.
Not necessarily.
Or partly work vacations. Well, thank you very much for coming by. Every year it's nice to see you back in Connecticut. Next week on this program, we'll be going into campaign mode. Our show next week, we're going to have Dot Ames and Aaron Ide, who are two candidates for City Council this year, who are not going to be on row A, the Democratic line. Aaron is on the Republican line, Dot is on the Green line, and it should be an interesting conversation. So,
Sounds good.
totally different. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Rana.
Thank you.